What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Walkout Podcast.
We talk about fights, news, and more. And today we're going to be doing something we haven't done before. We're going to do a little bit of a year in review for the last year, 2025, of UFC, and mainly the pay-per-view UFC numbered events. This is not going to be a review or a reaction like we've done after basically every event this past year. This is going to be more of just a general yearly recap, and then we're going to have a special segment at the end, right?
Yeah, exactly that. And just add on to what you just said, it's a bit interesting, I think, because when I watched through the previous events here, you almost forgot some of them, especially the ones in the earlier part of the last year.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to just take a quick look back and actually just remember the fights that were, and like you said, just ending off with a bit of another segment as well. But speaking of the events that were, the first one was UFC 311 that took place last January, almost a year ago now, where Arman Sarukian pulled out in the last day, I was pretty sure, against Islam Makhachev, and we ended up with Islam facing Renato Moicano and making pretty easy work of him. I mean, it seems like a long time ago now, doesn't it?
Yeah, seems like a really long time ago, but it was a really important event in a lot of ways because in this event, like already before the event started, you said Arman Sarukian pulled out. That was probably one of the big things that happened, and especially now, when we know, about what happened with Ilia Topuria, and him basically leaving the belt open, and Gaethje and Pimblet getting to fight over it.
Yeah.
Um, this decision that Arman took, it has a lot of knock-on effects that we're feeling right now, I think. And then there's other stuff during this card. So you have Merab versus Umar, and that was a really good fight, especially in retrospect. When we
Yeah,
saw
very
Merab
impressive,
the best
right?
versus Jan. Right, yeah, exactly right. And especially now with Umar, picking up wins and looking to get back on the title. And then before that, you had Yuri versus Jamal Hill, and Yuri, of course, knocked him out in the third round. And that's also interesting considering where both of them are right now. When this happened, this felt like a reasonable matchup, right? But looking at where they are now, that's kind of different.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It was like even on odds and a really,
Yeah.
really impressive win from Yuri. Goofy like always, but impressive
Yeah.
nonetheless. Um, but just quickly there, I think it's so interesting with the co-main where Marab defeated Umar. I don't know if you remember, I guess you do, but Merab was an underdog going into that fight. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
I mean, now that we
that's
look
true.
back on it, I know he lost his belt, obviously, as we'll get to at the end of the year, but the amount of defenses he had, and still, I know this was it his first proper defense? This I'm not sure. He won the
Yeah.
title last year, or sorry, 2024. It is against Sean O'Malley. I guess this was his first defense against Umar, but to come in
Yeah,
as
I
an
think it was
underdog
the first.
and then to see the year he had, I mean, beating Umar, then beating O'Malley the second time, then going on to beat Corey Sandhagen, and then of course the lose title. But shout out to Morale because the level of activity and to get the pretty decent and decisive win against an up and coming contender is really quite impressive, especially when he has Khabib in his corner telling him exactly what to do. So, but like I agree with everything else you said. And really interesting event all in all. And as you said, like we'll see going onwards here, it sends some shockwaves through the divisions and affected a lot of things throughout the year. And speaking about the rest of the year, we have the next event, which is or was sorry UFC 312, and probably, in my opinion, the most dominant title defense the entire year. Do you agree with that? With Dricus Duplessis obviously beating Sean Strickland for the title.
Yeah, I think I do. This was one of the better, I would say, beatdowns you could call it, because it was really a beatdown of the year over 5 rounds, and I think that the total score from basically all three judges, I think, was 50-45, or maybe
Yeah.
even I think one gave him a 50-44. So that just shows how incredibly dominant this fight was. And if I could just say something about this card in general, just now looking back at it, this has to be the worst pay-per-view I think of the year. If you look
Yeah.
at, I mean, seriously, I
I was
remember at
just
the time
thinking
I did,
that. This is amazing.
yeah,
Yeah. What is this?
I remember this not looking that good, at the time, but this looks even worse now. I don't know why, but it just looks, Jake Matthews, Francisco Prado, Jimmy Cruz, Bellato, Teixeira, Tafa. There's
Yeah, for context,
like, what is
yes, like you
this?
said, Tafa versus Teixeira was the featured fight, with
Yeah,
Chang versus Tatiana Suarez being the
crazy.
co-main. I mean, the event in general, but that seems to be the theme often when Dricus fights, right? I mean, the
That's
cards are
crazy.
very
Yeah, that's
rarely stacked. I don't know why.
yeah. It's kind of sad actually. They gave him the worst cards basically. We'll see if that changes now. When he, well, spoilers for those who haven't seen the last part of this video, but when he lost the belt, and now when he's going to get a new fight, maybe in the spring.
Yeah,
So we'll see what he comes back with then. But then maybe he has a better card. We'll see.
yeah, hopefully.
And do we have anything more to say about this one event, or should we move on throughout
Not
the
really,
year?
to be honest. I mean, I think we covered it. It was Dricus incredibly
Yeah,
impressive, even earning the respect of Sean Strickland, which is pretty hard to do. But all the credit to Dricus for that one. It will stay with us for a long time. That performance.
yeah, exactly. Especially if he comes back, with a big win, then you can look at that Strickland fight, and especially if Strickland comes back and gets a win when he fights. Who says he's gonna fight again now? Was it Anthony? No, who was
Anthony
it?
Hernandez, right?
Yeah, Anthony Hernandez, I think.
Yeah,
So it will be interesting if Strickland wins that one. Then maybe we can look at him, look at this fight, and if Dricus comes back with a big win, we can look at this fight in a different light, maybe even more intense than it was.
yeah,
But surely otherwise, looking at the general card, there's not much else here that feels like relevant right now. It just feels like it was something of the past. And moving on to something that definitely is more relevant, at least in the past couple of events, we have UFC 313, where Alex Pereira lost his belt versus Magomed Ankalaev in a quite controversial fight. And the rest of the card was Justin Gaethje who won versus Fiziev, and then you had Turner versus Bamondes, and Lemos versus Lucindo, and Green versus Ruffy, which at least the Ruffy fight here, that's something to look at. The other ones here, I don't feel. Maybe Gaethje. I mean, now with the upcoming
Paddy
interim,
fight, right? Yeah.
yes, that's one thing that you could look at, but otherwise doesn't really feel that relevant. The rest of the card. But what more can we say about Pereira versus Ankalaev here? Is there something that you want to pick up on, or with Gaethje here?
I mean, I was surprised with that Pereira performance, because a lot of people had Ankalaev beating him before the fight, and I think they were pretty much even going in on odds, and all the talk about, oh, it's his kryptonite, the wrestling, and all of that, and I was a bit like, Pereira's fought a lot of good wrestlers. He's fought Jan Blachowicz, and even though it was a close fight, he still won that one. So I didn't really buy that, but I thought his pace was very slow. And as we covered previously, now that he, like you said, spoilers again, but when he went in the rematch with Ankalaev, and it looked a bit different, um, I do buy the fact that Pereira was, I don't know if he was sick or was it he had some sort of injury, something was holding him back. And looking at it in retrospect, I really do believe that because we did see the old Potan recently. So yeah, a bit of a blip, but it also shows a lot of strength, to take a loss like a man and then come back and get your revenge. But of course, it was a big moment when someone loses like Alex Pereira, who is probably maybe a stretch, but maybe the biggest name in the UFC at that point. One of the biggest stars,
Yeah,
definitely.
I think so.
So, and there's talk about the super fight with John Jones or Aspinall, and then he goes on to lose the belt. So,
Yeah, and with Dricus.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
I remember before this, after Dricus won versus regards to the previous event, in 312, when he won versus Strickland, I remember seeing a video of Pereira and Dricus meeting backstage, and basically Pereira challenging Dricus and them talking about, um, are we going to fight, basically, and then Dricus told Pereira told Dricus to get his job done versus Hamzat, or the next guy or whoever it was gonna be after Strickland, and then Dricus told Pereira to get your job done versus Ankalaev.
Yeah,
And when I remember that, and I remember thinking, oh, we're gonna get Dricus versus Pereira, because even though I knew that it was quite a lot of people were predicting similarly versus Pereira and Ankalaev, that Ankalaev could take him. I still thought that Pereira would probably win that one, and we were gonna get some like real super fights. He said John Jones, and then just everything came crashing down. When Pereira lost his belt here, and then eventually Drickers versus Hamzat. That was really, for me at least, a real weird moment in retrospect now. When you had both of these guys lose their belt within the same space of, I don't know, 5 months or something,
yeah,
from March to August.
yeah. And unfortunately, that's such a usual thing nowadays in MMA when you eye up a potential super fight, and then someone just takes one more fight in between, and they go
Yeah.
out and lose, and it's just not the same as what it could have been. Um, but just a quick honorable mention as well. I know that you said it at the end there, but Ruffy against Green, I believe it opened this card up, and I think it's a contender for one of the best knockouts of the year. I mean, an
Oh,
incredible,
was this the spinning, the
yeah,
back?
the spinning wheel kick
Yeah,
versus
the wheel
Green.
kick. Yes.
Yes, I know Bobby Green is a bit slow and he has got a lot of losses, but he's always comes across as a tough guy. And to put him out like that, I mean, it was a real
Yeah.
star-making performance. A lot of us were aware of Ruffy before this, but for those who weren't, they definitely were after this. So I know he
The
went on
hype
to
was
take a loss,
the
but
hype was
yeah, but
yeah.
the hype was real. So to do that on main card as well of a pay-per-view was really quite special. Um,
People were talking about him. I remember now. People were talking about him. He's gonna be the next champ. Basically, he's the one
yeah,
that's gonna challenge the Poria eventually for the title or something. And then what happened later in the year, we'll speak of then, when we get there.
yeah, exactly. But then next up, it was probably one of my favorite events of the entire year. It was UFC 314, of course, where Alexander the Great defeated Diego Lopez, a fight that we'll see run back now in 2026, actually. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, this was quite a special event for us. I'm not gonna shy away from the fact that I'm obviously a big Volkanovski fan, and when he saw him get back clean knocked out, you never thought he would come back, right? And to then come back against a tough, really good contender, and to maybe it's a bit harsh to say that he schooled Diego Lopez, but there was no doubt that he won that fight, and just a great storyline, right, for Alexander to claim back that belt.
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of the. I also agree. Of course, every reasonable uh, person who likes the UFC should definitely like Alexander Volkanovski, or have some sort of soft spot for him, especially after all of the years he's put into the sport
Yeah,
and everything is done for the UFC, and just how great he is, like his nickname, basically. But yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that this was such a fight, just like you said, that it was a schooling, especially Volk being the older, the veteran here, and Lopez a bit more of the up and coming guy. And there was some hype. There's a lot of hype around Lopez. I think there was, and still is in some ways,
yeah,
because people think he has some sort of aura, or something like that. He has a cowboy hat and all that stuff, and he's an exciting striker, and so, but still, Volk showed him levels, I think, in this fight, and I think it was, obvious when you were watching it live, and you could just feel that Volker's definitely got this one in the bag. Shouldn't be any question about it, and it wasn't any question about it. And yeah, especially looking forward now with the rematch coming up, it puts this into a lot of uh, relevant. There's a lot of reason to go back to this fight now and just really analyze it, especially for Diego Lopez and Volk's team. You're
Yeah,
gonna analyze this first fight and you're gonna look at what was good, what was bad for respective fighter, and try to model their game for the rematch around it. I think
exactly.
so. We also had Paddy Pimblett knock out Michael Chandler. I think it was ground and pound in the third round.
Yeah,
And this fight was also, in the same bracket. This was a beatdown, a real beatdown from Pimblett against Michael Chandler. And I do think that, of course, Chandler is finished and stuff, but still, Pimblett probably, I think that this is probably the real reason why he's getting this, main event versus Gaethje, because this fight showed that he has some fire, he has some power, he can do, he's exciting in some ways at least. And
yeah,
maybe that is sort of why Dana White, because of course Arman is even more so, we saw what he did versus Dan Hooker just like a month ago, or 2 months ago maybe it was. I think it was in the like last of November or something when
yeah.
he fought versus Dan Hooker. Arman did,
Mm.
but still this was a good fight as well, and I think that Paddy Pimblett versus Justin Gaethje, it's going to be. I think it's gonna be actually a good fight per se. I don't know if I'm gonna say that it's gonna be a good. It's too early to talk about that fight actually now, but still, I don't think it's a worthy real. It's not a title fight, right?
No,
Not
no, no.
yet, at least. It shouldn't be. But it might be a good fight, is what I'm trying to say here. It's just that in
It should be
regards to
like a
Michael
BMF
Chandler,
fight, though. It's not the highest
yeah,
skilled
exactly.
fight. I'm sorry to say it, but I totally agree with you. It doesn't
I
reek of the,
agree. Yeah,
especially in the lightweight division. I mean, it's a division known for skill. Skill for skill, it's
yeah,
usually one of the best. And to have one of those guys, I'm sorry if I offend anyone, but it doesn't sit right with me either. Just like you said, they're incredibly entertaining, both of them. And maybe Paddy have evolved. I don't know. He hopefully has, because like you mentioned, this was his last fight in April. I mean, it's
and it
not.
was a beatdown, but it's against Michael Chandler. We have to
Yeah,
remember what
exactly.
top Chandler is,
It's,
and this was a long time ago.
and I'm not gonna say no disrespect here, because I can give all the disrespect to Michael Chandler. It's not hard to look good against him. We've seen a lot of guys look very impressive against Michael Chandler and then get in there with
Yeah,
the real dog and get messed up. So it's very difficult to say how much Paddy has evolved. Gaethje, I think we know where we have him right now. It's a bit uneven. Sometimes he looks really, really special. Sometimes he, like against Holloway, even though Holloway was very good in that fight, he looks, not gonna say brain dead, but he could do with a little more fight IQ. So hopefully that fight will at least bring us some entertainment. Um, just quickly though, on this event on 314, and when I look through some other notable things, I just remember back to Patricio Pitbull losing to Jair Rodriguez when they brought in Pitbull and signed him, and wanted him to get a big name fight, just coming in from, I believe it was
yeah,
Bellator, and then going in and
yeah,
losing that fight pretty clearly against. I know Jair is one of the better guys in the division, but it was still pretty disappointing. He was like one of the biggest names that the UFC actually did sign last year, and a bit of a letdown, we have to say, right?
yeah. I think so as well. I think that, and we're going to see this again through some other events throughout the year, that there were some, you know, beatdowns, or at least, the UFC showed some levels to some other fighters who came from other competitions,
Yeah,
and there's very few fighters who came from other divisions that actually succeeded, in that succeeded against good opposition, sort of in the UFC this year. Can you? I don't think I even can remember one actually who came from another organization who's
no,
completely new and did really well actually. I mean, I remember some guys who showed up, in early prelims or something, and put some beat down against a no name or submitted someone, but I
yeah,
can't
yeah,
really remember
but no
anyone who
big
showed
names.
up like this, on the main, like no one on the main card like this, or like, you know last fight before main card on the prelims or something,
Yeah,
and actually had a good fight. So it was a bad year almost, you could say, for the new guys in the UFC.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if you want to take a positive, like you mentioned, it is probably that the level is a lot higher in the UFC. It's the best division
Yeah.
in the world when it comes to MMA. So it's very difficult to come in from another promotion and fight in the UFC. And I guess we'll have to see that as a positive. But hopefully the trend can be changed in 2026 because we all like a new big name that can come in and actually make an impact in the divisions, especially the ones where you think it's a bit stale, and to just throw in a new name is can be very exciting. Just quickly, I know we're gonna move on to the next event, but I just saw that it was Bryce Mitchell against Gene Silva on this event as well. And I don't know if you remember the backstory, but this was the first fight after Bryce Mitchell had some very, let's say, intriguing uh, quotes about a certain historical leader. Um, and he was basically, I remember
Oh,
that
oh,
press conference where he was just sat at stage and people were like almost throwing things, shouting at him, booing him, and Gene Silva was like barking at the crowd. And it felt like a bit, I know it's maybe not the correct angle to go at it, but from an entertainment aspect, it was really quite OG UFC, you know, when the
yeah.
crowd actually cared about the fighters on stage. Because so often now, I don't know if you saw the launch press conference for 2026, and there were so many good fighters on the stage, but almost none of them were like even bigging up their fights. I mean, I just don't get it. So that's a little throwback
The
here.
only fun thing, is that the press conference where they had Derek Lewis, or
Yeah, yeah.
is
Exactly.
that
That's the
because
only thing you
yeah,
remember because Derek Lewis was actually
that's the
entertaining.
only thing I remember.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
was
it's Derek
good.
Lewis,
And
and he said some funny things, but there was no really like drama or oh shit, this really going down. There wasn't really that feeling to it, like you used to have with. Yeah, like I get what you're saying. Like you used to have with like I don't know Prime McGregor or something. We're
yeah,
never gonna get back to that level, but still, there hasn't really
yeah,
been that type of crowd engagement or like
and some
yeah,
stakes into a fight that's actually even. I
yeah,
mean, like I
stakes
said,
exactly.
Derek Lewis is like everyone knows, everyone loves him. He's very funny, but he's hardly one of the best active fighters right now. But I don't know why the other top guys just can't make a bit of beef and actually promote their fights. It's so that's what I mean. Even though maybe it was for bad reason, but it brought me back to see Bryce Mitchell and Gene Silva going back and forth. I think Gene Silva brought something up again with um, Bryce Mitchell believing that the Earth is flat, and Bryce Mitchell had some
Yeah,
cold lines about flattening out Gene Silva's world, something like that. Might sound
yeah,
a
yeah.
bit corny and cringe, but at least that's what
No,
I
it was
enjoy.
funny. Yeah,
And if you do have a press conference, surely the whole reason is to promote the fight and build some hype. Because why other should you have it? You can just scrap the whole thing otherwise. And like you see, there aren't almost any fans that go to them nowadays because the fighters don't promote it. There's nothing, there's no excitement,
yeah.
there's nothing to see. So hopefully a bit more fighters can actually create something in the coming year. I hope they get that, even though it won't be pay-per-views going forward on Paramount, obviously.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest here. I actually think that, and although you can say that this is a good thing in some ways, or I mean, it should be a good thing, but it sort of isn't in this kind of sport, and that is, it's almost too much respect now. I feel like between, I mean, there should be respect, of course, also between fighters, but there's almost too much like respect now between fighters where they're always smiling with each other, even when they're going to have a big fight upcoming between each other. They're like smiling, they're like hugging, and
Yeah,
they don't really know what to do. Sort of sometimes during the like, there are some exceptions, like for example, um, uh, you know, I don't know, Hamzat was at least, you can say what you want to say about him, but he was at least pretty crazy when he and Rickles faced off, and Rickles was also, very standoffish during
yeah,
that. There
yeah.
were no like hugs or stuff like that. So that was a good build up. But
Yeah,
then
and
the
they
fight
didn't
turned out to
talk
be,
that much
we're gonna
shit.
talk about that a bit.
It just felt real. And so you don't
Yeah,
need
it
to
felt
have
really
all this
genuine.
fake cringe beef. Just like I said with Rikas and Hamzat, that's a perfect example. Just make it real and actually make us
Yeah,
hyped
you just
for the
make it
fight.
feel like they don't like each other. That's just what you want. You just want to see these two guys, and you want to feel like both of these guys really want to get rid of each other. They don't need to hate each other, but they don't need to like smile and hug and whatever it is. Because normally, I like, for example, like Ilya Topuria, he's had some good, moments before, and also some, a bit cringe maybe when he was, when he and Volk had the whole thing about, Volk being so old, for example, and just Volk showed up, in the old
Oh,
man suit, and that was
yeah, yeah.
the yeah, and that was really funny, and it just turned out to be a bad thing for Topuria in that case, because
Yeah.
it just seems silly of him to be talking like that. But otherwise, for example, him versus Oliveira, uh, there was so much like, of course, I know both these guys, they respect each other, and especially, Ilya seemed to really respect Charles, and I get that, but I didn't get the feeling of this is an actual fight when the fight happened. It almost more felt like this is just an almost, Oliveira is walking in here to get knocked out, or something, because I knew that was probably gonna happen. I didn't have that hype of like Oliveira's actually going in there to take this fight, and I'm gonna see, a real fight happen. It almost felt like, this is just a ritual or something to just give Ilya the belt, and there was no real animosity between him and Charles in that fight. It
Exactly.
was like business, and I don't really like that, when it's just business between two guys. And what I really liked seeing, it was the when Pereira got his belt back.
Yeah.
That was the, when really you could see when he knocked him out, and he just landed, punch after punch when he was on the ground, and it was just incredible. That was the old UFC. He really, you could really see it, that Pereira, he would have, I mean, he could have killed, I think, Ankalaev if he didn't have the UFC octagon there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is crazy, but that is also what the UFC really is. It's an Ultimate Fighting Championship. It's not the Ultimate Friendship Championship. So
Yeah. Exactly. That's a great point there. And as you said, the best example is the fact that Alex Pereira barely speaks a word of English and is one of the best
yeah,
promotable guys in the division because he does all the talking in the cage, but he doesn't go around shaking people's hands before, at least not his opponents. He's very stern
yeah.
and he does show that he wants to fight even without speaking. So, yeah, I'm sorry that I went on a bit of a tangent there, but I think it's an interesting
No,
discussion to
I
have.
went on a tangent also. So
but
we both went on a tangent. So,
But then to move on, speaking to a bit of bad blood, which is also almost every time seems to be, it was UFC 315, Bilal Muhammad losing his belt on his first potential defense against Jacques Del Maddalena. Another clinic, we have to say. I know that I mentioned Drickus before, but this one was pretty clean also. Jacques Del Maddalena stuffing and stopping basically most of Bilal's takedowns. The fact that made a lot of people actually pick him against Islam Makhachev later on in the year. The fact that his boxing was so crisp, he did a lot of damage, and for me, it looked like they weren't really at the same level here. Is that fair to say? Do you think?
yeah, I think I agree also with this, with your summary there. I agree. They didn't look to be the same level, and I think that Jack, and especially with with the Islam versus Jedem fight in hindsight now, I look at this completely differently. I remember I looked at this and I thought that, damn, Jack looked so good. He's probably gonna be able to deal with. He might be able to deal with, Islam's takedowns, and might be able to even do some damage to him on the feet. And it's just nothing of that happened. So does that tell us more about, Belal, or does that tell us more about Jack and Islam? What do you think
I
there?
mean,
Maybe.
it's an interesting one. Yeah, a very good question actually. Personally, I could see both angles. I'm gonna be a bit more negative and actually do reckon that even though Jax shows some very crisp boxing, I think
Yeah.
it's not too difficult to do against Bilal Muhammad. And I know I'm gonna upset a lot of people here, but he is a bit of a slower target. He's a big target for welterweight as well. So it is a good fight for Jack to actually look good in. And don't get me wrong, I do think that Jack Maddalena is a very, very talented welterweight, and he will do well. But I also think he was a tad bit overhyped when he got that win as well. Um, and honestly, I do put it down a bit more to Bilal being bad than Jack being that good, but maybe to be fair, like a 60-70% split, not one way or another. It's not black and white, but yeah, difficult one. What's your opinion on it?
Yeah, I think that probably has more to do, just like you said, with Bilal actually being, not that good actually
Yeah.
than we might have thought beforehand because we saw, I mean, everyone saw the Ian Gary versus Bilal and just how Ian Gary, how effective he was versus Bilal. And I think that even though, of course, Ian Gary is probably, more potential, probably better in the long run than Jack is. And we'll see that when he faces Islam, when Ian Gary faces Islam.
Mm.
But still, I think that, yeah, I mean, we've seen twice in a row now, Bilal not being that good actually. And I think that he might go down as one of the worst champions actually. Not only in terms of, because a lot of people are already talking about how boring he is,
Yeah.
but actually, his skill, I don't think that his skills are that good. I mean, what he has is what is it, good cardio and some, he has decent, wrestling, but he does,
Canelo
like, there's
hands.
no, yeah, there's no real technicality to him. Like,
No, there
there is
isn't.
no Canelo hands. There is no there is no Jack de la Madalena boxing. There is no Islam Makhachev, takedowns and faking, kicks and then getting takedowns, all of that stuff. There's no there, like, there's no real, there's no. I mean, it sounds really harsh to say, like to say that there's no depth or something to his game, that there's no more levels to his game. But
No,
what
but
I
for,
mean is
for
that
this level,
yeah,
that's true. Yeah, totally.
yeah, that's basically what I mean. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like you say, some people might not get that when you talk about the previous champion, but that's totally what you say because even his strong points, like his wrestling and his cardio, isn't good enough because he could face
yeah,
someone like Islam Makhachev, and Islam Makhachev also has great cardio, great wrestling, but just like you mentioned, he
yeah,
has good striking, but also knows how to maneuver his wrestling to get him into more finishing positions. Whereas Bilal just lays on top of him, and some people might argue that that was what Islam did against JDM. But he just goes for takedown after takedown, and as we've seen when he faces a tougher opponent like JDM, like Ian Gary, he doesn't have much
yeah,
to do. So honestly, he might cruise in the rankings about the like 5 to 10 spot in the welterweight division and just fight contenders. But you have to be a bit entertaining to do that as well. So I don't know what the future holds for him. Um, but I feel like I've spent too much time already talking about Bilal Muhammad because I'm boring myself here. But so swiftly moving on, um, another great fighter in contrast to Bilal Muhammad at UFC 316, and I believe our first video on the channel was predicting
yeah.
this fight, where Merab Dvalishvili, like Chael Sonnen would have said, uh, uh, submitted Sean O'Malley. I mean, what do you remember from this one?
I mean, I remember the hype. Really is what I remember. From the first fight. The first fight being quite, at least quite close between Merab and O'Malley, and there was a lot of speculation before on what's actually gonna do, what's actually gonna go down in this fight. Are we gonna see Merab getting knocked out, or are we gonna see, what a lot of people predicted, Merab winning by a decision, and then we got a submission, and I just remember after this fight, just the hype of sort of Merab at least, when he had first O'Malley the first time, and then he had Umar, and then he won against O'Malley again and submitted him. And I just
Yeah,
remember like people going like, is there anything this guy can't do at this point except get knockouts? Um, and especially now when O'Malley hasn't had a fight in a long time, the more I think about this fight is I just think it was, if I'm gonna be honest, not a good choice to do this, especially when look at the situation right now in the division. Merab is no longer the champion. Jan is the champion. That's that's the kind of guy that Sean could beat, and he did. We don't have to speak about that fight because that was some time ago, and that's very controversial,
yeah,
apparently. But at least, what I mean is just that there's a completely different landscape right now, and if O'Malley actually was, like Umar did when he lost, he took some time off and just had a bunch of good, decent, wins in the meantime against Bautista and these other guys. If O'Malley would have done the same thing immediately after his title loss, um, I think that he would be in a really good, both mental and just hype position right now, where
Yeah,
he could actually challenge Jan probably for the title, and he'd probably be before Umar also in the pecking order. But right now he's after him. I think it's Umar first, and then it's O'Malley. And I'm just gonna be honest. I think that winning for O'Malley, winning the title versus Umar, I think that's gonna be more difficult um, than winning it against Jan. Even though of course I do rate Jan, but you know, I just think that Umar that's too much like Merab, and we've seen what the Merab type does to O'Malley basically. And I think that Umar, the wrestling, I just I don't really know if I want to see, or of course we want to see O'Malley versus Umar, but I would like to see O'Malley be champion sometime again in the future because I do think that it's entertaining, and he gets knockouts, which that's always good, and brings in a lot of people for the UFC.
yeah,
So I think that better planning in retrospect could have brought O'Malley closer to the title right now. But yeah, it was still an incredible performance by Merab, I think, this fight when it happened. And yeah,
definitely.
that's what I have to say about this one.
Yeah, just to add on to that, like you said, I think this was one that really gave him some credit because most of us who watch every single UFC event, we gave Merab a lot of credit when he beat Umar at the start of the year
Yeah.
because, like we said, he was an underdog, and we knew how tough of a fight that really was. And just the contrast as well with him beating a lot of strikers before and then fighting a top tier wrestler for the division and beating him as well pretty. I'm not gonna say easily, but it was a decisive win nonetheless for Merab. Um, but this one was one where even the casuals really got involved because a lot of people, especially in the US, they know Sean O'Malley and he's one of the biggest names. Um, and to beat him in that way when he said that he'd been out for almost a year, Sean O'Malley, um, and just rebuilding himself, becoming a better fighter, in his words, and a lot of us, I predicted Sean O'Malley. A lot of people expected a very close fight again. And like you said, Merab goes in there, makes pretty slight work, and submits him. It was a really great moment, and I am happy for Merab, I have to say, because he doesn't really get the credit he deserves a lot of the time because he's in a lighter weight class. Maybe he doesn't have the most easy on the eye style, so to say, at all times, but he got a lot of
But
hype.
even then,
Yeah, yeah,
if you remember during this fight, I thought it was pretty entertaining even in his wrestling during this fight because I remember them striking at least for a bit, I think, in the first round or something. And then, of course, he recognized that Sean O'Malley he's too dangerous. I think he hit him with a kick or something,
yeah, yeah.
and then Merab had to go more for the takedowns. But even then, in the takedowns, I thought it was pretty entertaining. I think was it this fight when he carried him and suplexed him, or am I mixing that up with maybe Umar or
I mean, it
he
feels like he does it
didn't
all
do
the
it twice,
time, so
but
I'm not sure to be honest. But
yeah, he's probably done it probably every fight this year or something. But I thought it was pretty entertaining, particularly this fight. And yeah, not sorry to interrupt you. Just wanted
no,
to
but
add that
that's
on.
basically the point I was making. You just summed it up
Yeah,
a bit better, but we'll get on to yeah, Merab later in this video, and Sean O'Malley obviously has a fight coming up in a few weeks here. Um, but then we move on to, I believe, International Fight Week, right, and UFC 317, and did we have possibly, quite possibly, event of the year and quite possibly knockout of the year? As, like you said before, it almost felt a bit scripted. Not that it was rigged, but more the
yeah,
fact that we knew that
no,
this was going to happen. Even though when we predicted this fight, I remember both of us saying that we can't really see him flatlining. You could in one way, and in another way, I just couldn't see it um, because he was coming up a weight class. But to put out Charles Oliveira like that, going up a weight class, I mean, do you have any words to summarize this?
yeah. I mean, I thought that I remember, when I was watching it live, and it just felt like I don't know, it was just so crazy the way the knockout landed, and there was so much hype in the arena.
Yeah,
Um, and so much, you sound from basically every action, everything that happened, just one takedown, one, punch being traded, and there was so much sort of hype in the audience for it. And when he landed a knockout, and it was like in the middle of a combination, or no, I think it was the second punch in a combination. It was like a hook. It's such a strange, knockout, because Oliveira, it just looked like everything is left him in that moment, and it was just, in the
Yeah, he just
middle of the
folded. Yeah,
sort of the, yeah, he's folded exactly in the middle of just the combination. It was like Ilya didn't even hit his last punch, and he's folded. It's like he had a tougher punch coming up after that he didn't even have time to land. But I don't know, it was such a crazy knockout when it happened, just lights out in the blink of an eye, really, you could call it.
yeah,
And
exactly.
probably one of the most important events and main events of the year. Um, and also, yeah, probably, I don't know, maybe the knockout of the year. I'm not exactly sure yet. We'll get to that later, but maybe. And then also on this card, we had Pantoja versus Kaikara France. Obviously, Pantoja submitted Kaikara France, like a lot of people, I think, predicted.
Yeah.
And do you think that this fight went any different? I thought that this fight went quite as basically as we predicted when we were reviewing it.
Yeah, I think both of us predicted a submission actually.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, it was for
like
once a
round two,
fight that
round four
was,
or something.
yeah, a fight that was
Mm.
actually pretty, not easy, but it was predictable because Kaiskova France has
Yeah,
a very exciting and not going to say good style because that's just what I think when I watch it. For fighting, it obviously it isn't enough when you fight a guy like Pantoja, but an entertaining style. But Pantoja is called a cannibal for a reason. He just eats that up. It doesn't matter what kind of style you have or how tough of a guy you are. He worked out a way to beat Kai France and to get to his back. Nonetheless, exactly how he has done before and how we predicted it would. And just an incredibly impressive performance once again from Alexander Pantoja. Uh, I mean, this one really stood out. One of my key rules is when you can count on a fighter to beat other top contenders. I think Kai France was like ranked number 4. When you can be certain that the champion will beat the number 4 ranked guy easily, it says a lot about the fighter. So, like you said, one that we did predict correctly and for a good reason. Uh, and then, do you want to take the last memorable fight? Because I'm not gonna talk about Benil Dariush versus Moicano because it was the slowest fight I've ever seen. But the contrast to that is Brandon Royval versus Joshua Wan. This was actually, sorry, actually also I was meant to say on this card. What did you think of this one?
yeah. This was I think the craziest fight when when you watch it live, and I don't know, every combination. I think that it was actually this fight probably, and then of course also the submission after, but it was probably this fight which actually built up the real hype in the audience for the main event.
Yeah,
This is like the perfect. I think this is the perfect featured fight in terms
exactly
of
what I
how it
thought.
was, played
Exactly
out.
that. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't know the way that this fight, just every so many, I think this broke the record for the like most amount of significant strikes
yeah,
combined in a. No, no, maybe it couldn't have because it's a free rounder. But I don't know. Maybe it was. I think it was most significant strikes per minute or something like that.
yeah. It definitely did. I think
Total.
so. Yeah,
It did break some. So it did break some sort of significant strike record because it was incredible. Every single punch landed. They were throwing us, or not every single punch landed, but what I mean is that every single punch, um, landed with intention. That
yeah,
landed. There were no soft punches, but they were just hitting each other. Combination. I was surprised no one got knocked out in this fight. It's quite incredible. It almost happened at the end. I remember when Van got a knockdown on Royval, and almost put him out at the end of the fight in the third round. But I don't know. This was such an incredible fight. I think it was also fight of the year officially of the UFC.
yeah. That's correct. I think.
Yeah, I think it was the fight of the year for UFC of the year, and yeah, probably does deserve it. I mean, it's so incredible.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry to
it
interrupt
really is
you.
the type of fight. Yeah,
I just had to do a quick fact check because this is just fascinating. Um, it was the first time in UFC history that both fighters landed at least 200 significant strikes in the same fight
That is incredible.
each. Isn't I
Yeah,
mean,
each that
and that's I had to double check this because when you said it, I did agree that it can't have been in a 3 round fight, but it was. They set the record in a 3 round fight where when there's a
in
lot
free
of
round.
fights, there are 5 rounds. I mean, it's just spectacular. One for the ages. We will be telling our grandkids about this one. It was like you
Yeah,
said,
I
you
mean,
were just wide awake.
it's just the ultimate featured fight. It's the ultimate free round fight, really. If this would have gone on any longer, either of them would have, I think, been knocked out. Probably Van would have knocked out Rival as the momentum was shifting towards the end of the fight, maybe. But still, it was an incredible fight when it happened, and I'm really happy for the UFC giving it recognition. I think it was the fight of the year, and also that is incredible, the significant strike record.
Yeah,
And it's also quite relevant right now when we had both Pantoja and Van facing off. I remember after Pantoja won his fight here
yeah.
versus Kakar France, they faced off in the octagon and started building up hype for their eventual fight that unfortunately ended early in the first round with a doctor stoppage um, for Pantoja when what exactly did he break? He broke his leg, I think, right? No, it was
In the
no,
van
his
fight.
arm.
Yes,
Yeah,
elbow, or I think it was
his
right.
elbow. Yeah, his elbow. It was. Yeah,
I think so.
yeah. He
Yeah.
landed. Yeah, he slipped right, and then he like landed on the elbow.
Yeah,
If I'm,
exactly.
can't remember exactly how he landed, but I think he landed on his elbow and it like twisted or something. It's really, really, really nasty.
Yeah.
But yeah, we hope that both of these guys can run it back because I do believe that Pantoja versus Van, maybe not exactly, we'll see, maybe not exactly the same skill tier actually, but you know, every Van fight for me is a good fight almost. I just love his style of boxing and just activity, and I hope that he and Pantoja can match up again and we'll see a really good fight. I don't want that fight to be a boring fight, and that would ruin Van for me basically,
No,
or
but it can't
Pantoja if
be. I know it's an important
no,
fight,
I don't
but
think so.
both
No.
they're
Yeah.
pretty much two of the most entertaining fighters in the world, so it has to be a banger,
Yeah.
surely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And should we move on to the UFC 318 here?
Yep.
And there we had Dustin Poirier going into his retirement, riding off into the sunset, as they say, and he lost versus Max Holloway, who won. I think it was a pretty clear uh, 5 rounder.
Yeah, it
I
was.
don't know exact scorecard, but I think he landed like double amount of strikes or something, and it was pretty obvious when you were watching it live. Poirier, of course, like the Diamond always does, he put up a valiant effort, but Holloway just had superior volume and quality. You could just see it during the fight, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like you said, the scorecards were very clear. I mean, most of the judges gave it by like 2 or 3 rounds to Holloway. And for the UFC, and going forward, I guess it was a good result. Um, just because of obviously Max Holloway is still going on fighting. And it was a classic, two of the greatest fighters to ever do it, in my opinion at least. But of course, all of us, I hope, would have loved to see Dustin get that last win. But it wasn't meant to be. But a legendary career, and that's pretty much what saved this event. Because I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a fan when they make the BMF belt the like main event. Um, I Sure, do
Yeah,
it as a co-main, sorry. But this, I mean, I'm looking at it now. What was even the co-main for this one? It was Holloway versus
Costa.
Poirier. Yeah, I mean, what is that? Costa was ranked like number
Yeah,
8 or 9 there. Koplev was like 12. So
like there's no stakes in that fight. It's just
no,
like who's gonna be the better gatekeeper.
exactly. So this was a bit of a lull after the, obviously UFC
Yeah,
317 super stacked international fight week. This one in the middle of summer wasn't all that. I'm gonna be honest, but of course, a nice main event with two legends. but no belt changing hands either. But it's fun to see Max Holloway get back to winning ways, right? I think we all love to see that, and as well a guy who
Yep.
can respect Dustin Poirier. And I do remember when he got his victory speech, he just said like, "Thank you everyone for coming out," um, and then gave the mic over to Poirier directly because obviously he needs that respect within the community. And I'm glad
Yep.
that Poirier hanged the gloves up, to be honest, because sometimes these kind of fighters, especially the warriors like Poirier, they do tend to stick around for a bit longer than they maybe should have. And I don't have any need to see Dustin Poirier get flatlined again and take more damage. So all in all, we have to say we're happy for him, and I heard he's doing well now that he's out of retirement. But not a lot else to say about this card, right? Or do you have anything else before we move on?
No, I mean I think that sums it up pretty well. Not that much of a remarkable card, except for of course the diamond going into retirement.
Yeah. All right, moving on then. UFC 319. Do you want me to take this one,
Yeah,
or do you want to kick it off, or should we go directly to
I mean
320? Or
I'm just gonna rant for 10, 20 minutes if we're gonna take this one, and I think we're running on time now, almost an hour or something. So
yeah,
um,
that's true.
um so I think you can take this one and sum it up as you
Yeah,
like.
we might have to do a
But
two-parter
yeah,
here to split up this video,
yeah,
possibly.
actually, might be a two-part.
Yeah, but just quickly on this one. Um, yeah, I mean, I do feel for you. I obviously like Dricus du Plessis as well. I think most people do, and he's a very entertaining fighter. I do have to say, I was so torn on this fight when I predicted it, what I would think. It was a very difficult fight to call. Hamzat was a slight favorite, but I don't really get that when Dricus' last fight was, even though it was against Strickland, he looked amazing and very well rounded. And they took in a lot of wrestling guys. You obviously have heard a famous thing about him like submitting 15 black belts in a row, Dricus that is. And his coach said something in the countdown to the lines of, "Oh, you think we're just gonna go in there and get out wrestled?" like that. And I was like, "Okay, they've got this." And then, I'm sorry, close your ears now, but Hamzat basically wet blanketed him for 5 straight rounds. It was the most boring fight I've ever seen. I'm not gonna beat around the bush. It was awful to watch. Sure, you can like controlled wrestling, and everyone gets there is a skill from Hamzat, but that doesn't mean that it's entertaining, especially a guy who talks that much like Hamzat does. Then it just becomes cringe. Like, bro, if you want to do that, be calm, be humble, and just say that it's your thing that you're a wrestler. But don't act like you're this gangster and then go in against another guy and just lay on top of him for 5 rounds. It's a bit lame, I'm gonna be honest. But nonetheless, if I had to beat Dricus du Plessis in a fight, I would also done the same because you don't want to stand and trade with him and you don't want to do anything else. But I do have to say I'm going to be a bit tainted here, and I hope that Dricus comes back because I think he's a much better champion for the UFC, partly on personality, but also on the fact that Hamzat, we know his activity. He's one of the least active fighters there is in the UFC. So having him as a champion, even though he's kind of a big name, it's a bit of a car crash. But yeah, do you want to add anything, or do you just want to move on here?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I completely agree. It was the worst fight of the year, I think, because when we're talking about, what's a good fight and what's a bad fight, when I think about it, especially after after it's done, I'm thinking about how, what did I expect beforehand? So, for example, when we're looking at, Sean O'Malley versus Merab in the second fight, beforehand, I thought, okay, I probably predicted a decision for Merab, and so it turned out to be more entertaining than I thought it would be, and it was a really good fight. Even though, of course, I think it was maybe more dominant from Merab, but he still showed up more of what he had to give, and he submitted him. So that was at least pretty entertaining, and I didn't really expect him to submit him. But in this fight, it's like I expected at least. I mean, I think I predicted, of course, Dricus to win because I'm slightly biased maybe in favor of him here when this fight was. um,
Yeah, that's
when
fair.
we were predicting this fight. And but still, I predicted Rickes by I think a knockout or something in the fourth round because I thought that okay, if he can ride the early takedown attempts and defend them and submission attempts especially and defend them because I thought that Hamza was gonna go. I thought that Hamza was gonna go all out and just go for a submission in the first second round and gas out probably if that is was how Rick was gonna win, and I thought that Hamzat, if he was gonna win, it was gonna be by a submission. And so this completely backfired. Even if, let's say, Hamzat would have won, and it would have been by a first, second round submission, then that's at least entertaining. Like the Whittaker when he submitted Whittaker,
Yeah.
it was a crazy submission, and you know of course, you have a soft spot for Whittaker, of course, a real warrior, and so you felt bad for him, but still it was an entertaining submission.
Yeah,
And
you
then
were
Hamza
impressed.
turned
Even though
up
we
with
were
this,
sad,
yeah,
we were
exactly. So,
impressed. So
yeah, and then Hamza just turns up with whatever this was against Dricus Duplessis, one of the more entertaining fighters in the UFC in terms of personality and what he gives in the fight. Um, So it was just incredibly, it wasn't just that the fight itself was, which is of course it was really bad. It's also that I expected a lot better. Everyone expected better. People were talking about. I remember people talking about this fight as fight of the year beforehand. It even happened.
yeah,
People expected it to be
we
a
did.
crazy fight. Yeah, we did exactly, and it turned out to be a crazy letdown. So, but in regards to the rest of the card here, I think that the rest of the card was actually pretty decent. Not beforehand from what you expected, but it turned out actually. I remember it turned out to be pretty good. I mean, Tim Elliott when he submitted Kaya Sakura, quite surprising.
What an upset!
Mark,
Yeah, he was an
yeah, that was a
extreme
really
underdog.
big
Yeah,
upset. Actually, I remember, and Michael Page put on a pretty clean striking clinic against Cannonier. You know, it's always entertaining when a good striker has good striking, slick boxing, which slick striking, which is what Michael Page showed up there, and then we had a back to back, insane knockouts. I
yeah,
think both were spinning elbow knockouts. Carlos
yeah,
Prates and Lear Murphy, both in the first round. Both think it was both by spinning elbow knockout. I mean, you could put both of these up for contender for knockout of the year. That's how good they were, and that's how much hype there was before the main event, and that just makes it even worse. Actually, that just
yeah.
makes the main event even worse. So
That's true.
rest of the card actually good in terms of what we thought beforehand. Probably like 8 out of 10, and then main event was just a 1 out of 10 or 0 out of 10. So
Yeah,
that's all I have to say about that one,
yeah. But at
unfortunately.
least, like you said, a really ideal rest of the card. Like you said before the fight, it didn't really, or before they went, should I say, it didn't excite you
Didn't
that
look
much.
like much. Yeah.
Yeah, because you could see all of the fights and basically how they would go. But like you said, an extreme upset for Tim Elliott, then a striking clinic between Michael Page and Cannonier, and both guys doing pretty well. Cannonier was good in that fight, but Michael Page was just better, but a pretty entertaining fight as well. And then two
Yeah.
spectacular, and that's also the thing when you watch these things like live, when you see one spinning elbow knockout from Carlos Prates, who is the guy to do that kind of thing, then I really expected a lame fight from Leron Murphy, who was the
Yeah.
underdog against Aaron Pico, who was the new guy that they were trying to promote, just throwing him into a co-main spot. And Leron Murphy goes out in round one and knocks him out with a spinning elbow. That was really something, really quite impressive. So
Yeah.
at least that
Exactly.
builds some excitement. But like you said, I feel bad for everyone who stayed up to watch that main event because it was just a total letdown. If we're gonna be honest, we don't sugarcoat things over here.
No, we tell it as it is.
But yeah, as we just mentioned, this video has been going for almost an hour now, so we're just gonna split this up and post the second part as a separate video. So stay tuned for that. It will be released in the next few days. But thank you guys a lot for listening, and we'll catch you next time.